Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
My brother always told me I'd never amount to anything. He laughed at my dreams, dismissed my hard work, and acted like he was better than me. Years later, when he lost everything, he came to me asking for a job. What happened next was the sweetest revenge I could have imagined. Growing up, my brother Adam was everything I wasn't: outgoing, athletic, and effortlessly charismatic. He was the golden boy, the star of every family gathering, the one everyone believed would make it big. Coaches raved about him, teachers adored him, and my parents? Well, they practically worshipped the ground he walked on. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the nerd. I preferred the company of books and computers to people, and I spent my weekends tinkering with gadgets in the garage. While Adam was winning trophies and being cheered on at football games, I was designing my first website or trying to fix an old radio. Adam never missed a chance to rub our differences in my face. "You'll never make it in the real world," he'd say with a smirk, tossing a football back and forth. "You're too soft, too weird. Just stick to your little hobbies." At the time, his words stung, but I learned to hide the hurt. Instead, I told myself I'd prove him wrong one day. The worst part wasn't Adam's taunts. It was how our parents fueled his ego. My mom and dad doted on him, showering him with praise for every accomplishment, big or small. If Adam scored a touchdown, they threw a party. If I built a fully functional drone from scratch, I'd get a polite nod and a half-hearted "that's nice, honey." It was always, "Did you see Adam's game last night?" or "Adam's coach says he has a shot at a scholarship." No one ever asked about my projects or the hours I spent teaching myself programming from library books. For years, I convinced myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But deep down, it hurt to feel invisible in my own family. One memory stands out more than any other. It was career day at school, and my dad was supposed to come talk about his job as a mechanic. I was excited because I'd always admired how he could take apart an engine and put it back together like magic. But that morning, he told me he couldn't make it. "Adam has a big game this afternoon," he said, patting me on the shoulder. "You understand, right? It's important." Of course, I said I understood. What else could I do? But as I sat in the classroom, watching other kids beam as their parents talked about their work, I felt the familiar pang of being second place, an afterthought. That day, I made a promise to myself. I didn't need Adam's approval, and I certainly didn't need my parents' constant praise. If I was going to succeed, I'd do it on my own terms. What I didn't realize then was just how long it would take, and how much sweeter the victory would feel. When Adam left for college on a full sports scholarship, it was like the entire family had won the lottery. My parents beamed with pride, throwing a celebratory barbecue and bragging to anyone who would listen. "He's going places," my dad would say. "Just you wait." I didn't begrudge Adam his moment, but it was hard to ignore the glaring contrast between his send-off and my own post-high school plans. I stayed local, enrolling in night classes at the community college while working a string of odd jobs during the day. To my family, this was further proof that Adam was destined for greatness while I was just there. "I guess college isn't for everyone," my mom said once, as if I'd dropped out instead of choosing a path that didn't leave me drowning in debt. Adam didn't miss a beat, chiming in with, "Yeah, not everyone can handle the pressure." He laughed, and my parents laughed with him. I smiled politely, as I always did, but inside I felt the sting. What my family didn't realize was that I wasn't coasting. I had a plan. It wasn't flashy or impressive, and it didn't come with the immediate applause Adam's football games did. But it was mine. During the day, I worked whatever jobs I could find, waiting tables, stocking shelves, even cleaning offices late at night. The hours were long, and the pay was barely enough to scrape by, but it gave me time to save money and focus on what really mattered: building my skills in tech. At night, I poured myself into learning everything I could about computer science. I devoured online tutorials, taught myself coding languages, and practiced building websites for fun. It was grueling, lonely work, but every line of code felt like a small step toward something bigger. Eventually, I started taking on freelance projects, coding websites and apps for small businesses. At first, it was just for a little extra cash, enough to cover textbooks and maybe treat myself to a decent meal once in a while. But as my skills grew, so did my reputation. By the time Adam graduated college, I had built up a steady stream of clients who trusted me with their projects. It wasn't glamorous, but it was proof that my little hobbies were turning into something real. Adam, of course, came home to a hero's welcome. My parents threw him another party, complete with balloons and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Adam." He strutted into the backyard like a king, regaling everyone with stories about his glory days on the college field. "Still doing your computer thing?" He asked me between bites of steak. Yeah, I said, keeping my tone neutral. That's cute, he said with a grin. Maybe one day you'll get a real job. I smiled, biting back the urge to tell him what I'd accomplished. I wanted to say, actually, Adam, I've been building something incredible while you've been playing games. But I kept it to myself. I wasn't ready to show my hand just yet. Instead, I doubled down. With the money I'd saved from freelancing and my part-time jobs, I launched my own small tech startup. I rented a tiny office, hired a couple of friends who shared my passion for coding, and began working on software solutions for businesses that needed help streamlining their operations. It was terrifying. I had no safety net, no guarantee of success. But for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. While Adam was celebrating his first big job in finance, I was pulling all-nighters and surviving on instant noodles. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. What I didn't know then was just how much my hard work would pay off, or how the tables would turn when Adam's perfect life came crashing down. While I spent my days grinding away in a small, windowless office and my nights coding until my eyes blurred, Adam was living the life our parents had always envisioned for him. He landed a job at a prestigious finance firm straight out of college, quickly climbing the ranks. Within a year, he was posting photos of his new sports car on social media, followed by snapshots of his sleek city apartment. My parents couldn't have been prouder. Adam's doing so well for himself, my mom would gush to anyone who'd listen. Every family gathering became an unofficial tribute to his accomplishments. If he wasn't recounting tales of his latest promotion, my parents were doing it for him. And then there was me, sitting quietly in the corner, the afterthought. While Adam regaled everyone with stories of lavish work dinners and exotic vacations, I stayed silent about my progress, knowing it wouldn't matter. My startup was small, my successes too modest to compete with the glitz of Adam's life. One particular holiday dinner sticks out in my mind. The table was set with all of my mom's best dishes, and the atmosphere was buzzing with energy, thanks to Adam. He had just returned from a business trip to Europe, and my parents hung on his every word as he recounted the details. The clients loved me, he said, grinning as he cut into his steak. My boss said I practically closed the deal single-handedly. They even upgraded me to first class on the flight back. That's amazing, my dad said, raising his glass in a toast. You've always had a way with people, Adam. They turned to me briefly, as if realizing I hadn't spoken all evening. And what about you? My mom asked. How's the computer stuff? It's going well, I said, keeping my tone casual. We've landed a few new clients, and we're working on a project I'm really excited about. Before I could say more, Adam cut in. So, are you still doing that little startup thing? Or are you thinking about getting a real job soon? Everyone laughed, including my parents. The words stung, but the laughter twisted the knife. I forced a smile, swallowing the retort that was on the tip of my tongue. Moments like that became routine. No matter how hard I worked or how much progress I made, I was still the loser little brother in Adam's eyes. And my parents, blinded by their pride in him, never stepped in to defend me. But what Adam didn't realize was that every jab, every dismissive comment, fueled my determination. He might have had the spotlight now, but I was building something real, something lasting. I didn't need their validation. All I needed was time. Little did Adam know, his perfect life wasn't as untouchable as he believed. And when it all came crashing down, the tables would finally turn. While Adam basked in the glow of his high-powered career, my so-called little computer projects were quietly gaining momentum. It started with a single client, a small local business that needed a custom app to manage their inventory. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable. I poured myself into the work, and when it was done, the client couldn't stop raving about it. Word spread, as it often does when you deliver something people genuinely need. One project turned into 2, then 5, then 10. Soon, I was working with clients from across the country, creating software solutions that made their businesses run smoother and faster. Each new project brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to prove myself. I worked insane hours, barely stopping to eat or sleep some days. The money trickled in at first, just enough to cover expenses and keep the dream alive. But I wasn't doing this just for the paycheck. I was building something bigger, something that would outlast the dismissive remarks and the doubts that had been cast on me for years. My first major milestone came when a mid-sized company reached out to me for a custom software package. It was the kind of deal that could take my fledgling startup to the next level, but it also came with enormous pressure. I spent weeks obsessing over every detail, testing and retesting until I was certain the final product was perfect. When I delivered it, the CEO couldn't have been happier. This is exactly what we needed, he said, shaking my hand. I'll make sure to recommend you to everyone I know. True to his word, referrals started pouring in. I was no longer just a guy tinkering with code in a tiny office. I was running a real business. I hired my first employee shortly after that, a fellow coder who shared my passion for solving problems. Then came another, and another, until my small team had grown into a tight-knit group of talented people. Every day brought new challenges, managing deadlines, navigating client demands, and keeping the lights on. There were moments when I doubted myself, nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd taken on too much. But those moments were fleeting. Deep down, I knew I was on the right path. By the time Adam was celebrating his 5th promotion and posting pictures of yet another vacation, I had moved into a sleek downtown office. The space wasn't huge, but it was mine, a tangible representation of everything I'd built from the ground up. I was negotiating contracts worth sums I could barely have dreamed of just a few years earlier. Clients were starting to refer to my company as an industry leader, and investors were reaching out, eager to get in on the action. But through all of this, I kept quiet. I didn't post about my successes on social media. I didn't brag at family gatherings. I didn't even tell my parents about the deals I was closing or the growth my company was experiencing. It wasn't because I wanted to hide what I was doing. It was because I wanted my success to speak for itself. I knew that one day, Adam and everyone else who had dismissed me would have no choice but to take notice. For now, though, I was content to let them underestimate me. Every dismissive comment Adam made, every time my parents overlooked my achievements in favor of his, only added fuel to my fire. I didn't need their validation to keep going. I had something far more valuable, a clear vision of where I was headed and the determination to get there. What I didn't realize then was just how quickly things were about to change, not just for me, but for Adam. His perfect life, the one my parents idolized, was teetering on the edge of collapse. And when it all came crashing down, the tables would finally turn in ways none of us could have predicted. It all happened so fast. One day, Adam was posting pictures from a luxury work retreat in the Bahamas. The next, he was announcing that his company had gone under. The financial firm he worked for had been hit hard by an economic downturn, and they laid off most of their staff, Adam included. At first, Adam acted like it wasn't a big deal. "I'll find something else," he said confidently at a family dinner, brushing off my mom's worried questions. "A guy like me? I won't be unemployed for long." He laughed it off, but there was a tension in his voice that I hadn't heard before. It was subtle, but it was there, a crack in his unshakable facade. Weeks turned into months, and Adam's confidence began to waver. The job market wasn't as forgiving as he'd expected, especially for someone whose success had always been tied to his company's name rather than his own abilities. At first, he burned through his savings, holding on to the life he had built for himself. But as the months dragged on, reality began to set in. His sleek sports car, once a symbol of his success, was the first thing to go. He sold it reluctantly, muttering something about downsizing as if it were a strategic choice rather than a necessity. Next came the apartment. I heard about it through my parents, who were clearly distressed at the thought of their golden boy struggling. "Adam's just hit a rough patch," my mom said during one of her many attempts to reassure herself. "He'll bounce back. He always does." But Adam didn't bounce back, not this time. With nowhere else to go, Adam moved back into our parents' house. For someone who had always prided himself on his independence, it was a humiliating blow. The man who once bragged about his first-class upgrades and expensive suits was now sleeping in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by trophies from a high school football career that no longer mattered. The first time I saw him after he moved back, he looked different. The confidence that once radiated from him had dimmed, replaced by something I could only describe as frustration. He greeted me with a half-hearted smile, and for the first time, there was no teasing, no smug remarks. "How's it going?" I asked cautiously. He shrugged. "It's fine," he said, though his tone betrayed him. "I'm just waiting for the right opportunity." But as weeks turned into months, it became clear that the right opportunity wasn't coming. Adam, who had always been the golden boy, was now just another unemployed guy trying to navigate a world that didn't care about his charm or his past glories. For the first time in my life, I saw a side of Adam I hadn't seen before. He wasn't invincible, and he wasn't untouchable. He was human, just like the rest of us. But even as I watched him struggle, a part of me couldn't forget the years of dismissive comments, the way he had belittled me for chasing my dreams. I didn't revel in his downfall. It wasn't about schadenfreude, but I couldn't ignore the irony of the situation. Adam had spent years looking down on me, convinced that his path was the only one that mattered. And now, the roles were beginning to shift. For the first time, he wasn't the golden boy. And for the first time, he looked at me not with condescension, but with something that resembled humility. Family dinners had always been a showcase for Adam's accomplishments, but lately, they'd taken on a different tone. The conversations were quieter, punctuated by my mom's worried glances in Adam's direction and my dad's awkward attempts to steer the subject away from work. Adam, usually the loudest person at the table, was subdued, picking at his food while the rest of us made small talk. It was during one of these uncomfortable meals that Adam finally addressed the elephant in the room. He sat across from me, his shoulders hunched slightly, an unusual posture for someone who had always carried himself with so much confidence. "So," he said, clearing his throat, "I heard you've got a company now." I glanced up, surprised. Adam rarely showed interest in what I was doing unless it was to poke fun at it. "Yeah," I said simply. "It's going all right." Adam shifted in his chair, his discomfort obvious. "Must be going pretty well," he said, forcing a smile. "Mom mentioned something about you getting new clients." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "We've been busy," I said, not offering any more than that. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping just enough to catch my attention. "Well," he began, "I was wondering, do you have any openings?" I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. "Adam? Asking me for a job?" He continued, trying to sound casual. "I've got a lot of experience in management. I could probably help out with some of the bigger picture stuff." I nearly laughed out loud. This was the same brother who had spent years belittling my work, calling it a hobby, and telling me to get a real job. And now he was sitting across from me, asking for a handout. I leaned back in my chair, taking a moment to process what he had just said. "You're looking for a job?" I asked, keeping my tone as even as possible. Adam's face flushed slightly. "Yeah," he admitted, glancing down at his plate. "Things have been tough lately. I've sent out applications, but the market's competitive. And I figured, since we're family, maybe you could help me out." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. For years, Adam had been the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. He had always made it clear that he thought he was better than me, and now here he was asking for my help. I could feel my mom's eyes on me, silently pleading with me to say yes. My dad stayed quiet, but I could tell he was listening closely. "I'll think about it," I said finally, setting my fork down. Adam looked relieved, as if he had expected me to flat out refuse. "Thanks," he said, giving me a small, almost sheepish smile. "I really appreciate it." The rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence, but my mind was racing. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind Adam of every dismissive comment he had ever made and let him figure things out on his own. But another part of me saw an opportunity, not just to help him, but to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. When I got home that night, I talked it over with Matt, who had been my sounding board throughout this entire journey. "What are you thinking?" he asked, setting down his mug of tea. "I'm thinking I'll hire him," I said slowly. "But not in the way he's expecting." Matt raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's not walking into some cushy management role," I said. "If he wants to work for me, he's starting at the bottom, just like I did." Matt smiled, a glint of approval in his eyes. "Now that's a plan," he said. I nodded, already envisioning the conversation I'd have with Adam. This wasn't about revenge. It was about leveling the playing field and giving him a taste of the real world he'd always dismissed. Adam thought he was asking for a favor, but what he didn't realize was that he was about to learn the meaning of hard work. And I was more than ready to show him. After dinner that night, I mulled over Adam's request. Part of me wanted to shut him down immediately. The thought of turning him away with a cutting remark, something that mirrored the dismissive jabs he'd thrown at me over the years, was tempting. But as I replayed the conversation in my mind, a different idea began to form. This wasn't just about a job. It was an opportunity to show Adam what it meant to start from nothing, to work your way up without shortcuts or handouts. It was a chance to remind him of the humility he had always lacked and the work ethic he had often dismissed as small time. The next day, I picked up the phone and called him. He answered almost immediately, his voice a mix of nervousness and forced cheer. "Hey," he said, "thanks for getting back to me. So, what's the verdict?" "I thought about it," I said carefully, "and I'm willing to give you a shot." "Really?" he asked, the relief in his voice unmistakable. "That's great. I won't let you down, I promise." "Hold on," I said, cutting through his enthusiasm. "Before you get too excited, there's something you should know. You're not stepping into a management role. If you want to work for me, you'll have to start at the bottom, just like everyone else. You'll learn the ropes, prove yourself, and earn your way up." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost hear him processing what I'd said, weighing his pride against his desperation. "The bottom," he repeated finally, his voice uncertain. "Yes," I said firmly. "I started at the bottom when I built this company, and so did every member of my team. No one gets special treatment. Not even you." He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he might refuse. But then he sighed and said, "All right. If that's what it takes, I'll do it." Adam's first day at my company was surreal, to say the least. Gone was the cocky, self-assured brother I had grown up with. In his place was someone quieter, someone who seemed unsure of himself for the first time in his life. I assigned him to an entry-level position in customer support, where he'd spend his days troubleshooting software issues and fielding calls from clients. It was a far cry from the management role he had envisioned, and it showed. At first, he struggled. He fumbled through training sessions, misinterpreted client requests, and made mistakes that his co-workers had to fix. His frustration was obvious, but to his credit, he didn't complain, at least not openly. "Is this really necessary?" he asked me during a break one day, his tone edging toward exasperation. "I mean, I know how to handle people. I could be doing so much more." "Adam," I said calmly, "if you can't handle the basics, how do you expect to manage anything else? This is part of the process. Everyone here went through it, and so will you." Over the next few weeks, I watched as Adam slowly adjusted to his new role. The work was humbling, and it forced him to confront parts of himself he had never acknowledged before. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just another employee, trying to prove his worth in an environment that didn't care about his charm or his past accomplishments. To my surprise, he began to adapt. He started asking questions, seeking feedback, and taking responsibility for his mistakes. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was progress. One evening, as I was locking up the office, I saw Adam still at his desk, poring over a troubleshooting guide. He looked up as I approached, a sheepish smile on his face. "Just trying to get the hang of this," he said, holding up the guide. "Good," I said simply, nodding in approval. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that Adam might actually learn something from this experience, not just about the job, but about life. And while he still had a long way to go, I couldn't deny that seeing him in this position, working hard, swallowing his pride, was a small victory in itself. Watching Adam navigate his new role was like observing someone try to learn a new language. Awkward, frustrating, and humbling. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the star of the show. His charm and past accolades meant nothing to his co-workers, who were more concerned with results than charisma. It didn't take long for the reality of his situation to sink in. Adam, who had once looked down on everyone else, was now the one taking orders, following procedures, and answering to people who didn't hesitate to call him out when he fell short. He had to deal with upset clients, troubleshoot technical issues he barely understood, and juggle deadlines without shortcuts. The first few weeks were rough. He stumbled constantly, his frustration bubbling just below the surface. But to his credit, he kept showing up, even when the work chipped away at his pride. At first, Adam struggled to hide his resentment. "I don't get why they're so strict about every little thing," he said to me one evening after work, his tone edging on complaint. "I mean, it's not like the world's going to end if a client has to wait an extra hour for a fix." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "That's the difference between good businesses and great ones," I said evenly. "Clients trust us because we don't make them wait. If you don't care about the details, you can't expect to succeed." He looked down, muttering something under his breath, but I could tell my words were sinking in. Slowly but surely, Adam was starting to see that the work he had once dismissed as easy required real dedication and skill. What fascinated me most was watching him interact with his co-workers. These were people who had no reason to be impressed by him. They didn't know about his past life of luxury or his golden boy status. To them, Adam was just another new hire, and they treated him as such. There were moments when he bristled under their straightforward feedback, but over time, he began to adjust. He started asking questions, listening instead of talking, and taking notes during meetings. It was as though he was learning, for the first time, what it meant to be part of a team. One day, I caught him in the break room, chatting with a coworker, a guy named Eric who had been with the company since the early days. Eric was explaining a tricky software update process, and Adam was nodding intently, even jotting down notes on a scrap of paper. Later, Eric pulled me aside and said, "You know, your brother's not as bad as I thought he'd be. He actually listens, and he's starting to pick things up." I couldn't help but smile. That was high praise coming from Eric, who didn't hand out compliments easily. The real turning point came during a particularly chaotic week when a major client reported a system failure. The whole office was in overdrive, scrambling to troubleshoot and get things back online. Adam, instead of shrinking into the background, rolled up his sleeves and pitched in wherever he could. By the end of the ordeal, he was covered in metaphorical sweat but grinning from ear to ear. "That was intense," he said, collapsing into a chair. "But kind of rewarding, you know." For the first time, I saw a spark of genuine appreciation in his eyes, not just for the work itself, but for the effort and dedication of the people around him. Over the next few months, the shift in Adam became more pronounced. He stopped acting like he was above everyone else and started pulling his weight without complaint. He even began showing up early, eager to tackle his tasks before the office got busy. One day, I overheard him talking to a new hire, encouraging them as they struggled with a challenging task. "Don't worry," he said. "I made the same mistake when I started. You'll get the hang of it." It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. Adam was learning what I had known all along, that success wasn't about shortcuts or charm. It was about putting in the work, respecting the people around you, and staying humble enough to grow. And for the first time, I felt a sense of pride, not just in what I had built, but in the person my brother was becoming. It was late on a Friday evening, and the office was unusually quiet. Most of the team had gone home for the weekend, leaving behind the faint hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. I was finishing up some last-minute emails when I noticed a light still on in the corner of the office. Curious, I walked over and found Adam sitting at his desk, staring intently at his screen. His tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up, a sight that had become increasingly common over the past few months. He looked up as I approached, and for the first time, his usual air of defensiveness was absent. "Still here?" I asked, leaning against the edge of his desk. "Yeah," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted to finish this client report. It's been a long week, but I figured I'd get a head start for Monday." There was a pause, and then Adam did something I hadn't expected. He turned to me, his expression unusually serious. "Hey," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I nodded, pulling up a chair. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he began, gesturing vaguely around the office. "About you, about this company, about how I ended up here." I raised an eyebrow, unsure where he was going with this. "I just wanted to say, I was wrong about you," he said, meeting my eyes. His tone was steady, but there was a vulnerability in his voice that caught me off guard. "You've built something incredible here, and I didn't give you enough credit for that." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Adam had spent years dismissing my work, belittling my ambitions, and treating me like a joke. Hearing him admit he was wrong felt surreal, almost like I had stepped into an alternate reality. "I mean it," he continued, his voice soft but firm. "I was an ass. I looked down on you because I thought I had it all figured out, and I didn't. You've worked so hard, and I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it." He let out a shaky breath, as if the weight of his words had been building for years. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all the times I put you down. You didn't deserve that." His apology was raw and unpolished, but it was real. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Finally, I spoke. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." Adam nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I've learned a lot working here," he said. "Not just about the job, but about myself. I used to think success was about having the biggest title or the flashiest car, but it's not. It's about the work, about building something that matters. And you've done that. You've done it in a way I never could." I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I pushed it down. For years, I had dreamed of a moment like this, of Adam finally seeing me for who I was, not who he thought I was. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a turning point. "Listen," I said, leaning forward. "I'm not perfect, and neither are you. But I'm glad you're here, and I'm proud of the work you've been doing. You've come a long way, Adam." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that I hadn't seen in years. "Thanks," he said. "That means a lot, too." As I walked back to my desk, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Adam's apology didn't erase the years of hurt, but it was a step forward, a sign that maybe, just maybe, our relationship could grow into something better. For the first time, I saw Adam not as the golden boy or the arrogant older brother, but as someone who was finally learning what it meant to be humble, to work hard, and to respect the people around him. And for the first time, I felt like we were on even ground. Today, my relationship with Adam looks nothing like it did when we were growing up. The years of competition and condescension have been replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Working together didn't just teach him to respect me. It showed both of us how to appreciate each other's strengths in a way we never had before. Adam still works in my company, Though he's moved up from the entry-level position I started him in. Through his own hard work, he's earned a role that suits his skills and leadership potential. And while he still has moments of overconfidence, they're tempered by a humility he didn't have before. Every now and then, we'll sit down for a drink after work and talk about how far we've come. I can't believe I used to think I had it all figured out, Adam admitted during one of these conversations. You were building something incredible, and I didn't even see it. It's funny, I said with a smirk. You always told me I'd never amount to anything. He winced, shaking his head. Yeah, about that. I was a total jerk. I'm sorry, man. Looking back on the journey, I wouldn't trade any part of it. Not the late nights, the self-doubt, or even the years of feeling overshadowed by Adam. Every struggle shaped me into the person I am today and brought me to where I am now. Running my own company has been a dream come true, but proving Adam wrong was the icing on the cake. Seeing him acknowledge my success, not just to me, but to others, was a victory I never knew I needed. Our parents, too, have started to see me in a different light. While they'll always have a soft spot for Adam, they've finally stopped treating me as the quiet one in the background. At family gatherings, my mom will brag about the success of my company, and my dad will ask me questions about my work with genuine interest. It's strange to think about how far things have come, but I'm grateful for every step of the journey. To anyone out there who's ever been told they'd never amount to anything, I have this to say: don't let it stop you. People will doubt you. They'll underestimate you. They'll laugh at your dreams. But their doubts don't define you. Your actions do. Keep going. Keep growing. Work hard, stay humble, and never stop believing in yourself. One day, when you've achieved what they thought was impossible, they'll have no choice but to see you for who you really are. And in that moment, you'll realize you didn't just prove them wrong. You proved yourself right. And trust me, when you get there, the last laugh will be worth every single struggle along the way.